Hi, Robin. Welcome to the Grow and Connect podcast. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you, Igor. Thank you for inviting me here.
Well, great. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and keep it short because despite the fact my career being 22 years now in business, so the first 12 years of that was spent running a marketing agency, so predominantly doing web design and branding. Got to about 2016 and the various sort of all-nighters and last minute project deliveries and various things like that were starting to take its toll. And also at the same time, my family was growing, so my second daughter was about to be born as well. And essentially, I hit a bit of a phase of burnout, I suppose, would be one way of describing it. I woke up one day and just thought, do you know what? Actually, I think I want to shut the agency down. Started putting the feelers out and transpired somebody had been interested in the business for a while. And I accepted an offer from somebody to buy it. What that meant though was, firstly, I was able to enjoy my paternity leave and finally just get a bit of rest and recuperation done to sort of recover from my 12 years of agency days. Eventually, though, I did want to go back and start having conversations with people. So went to some local networking groups, and one of the first questions they always ask you is, "So, what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, right now, nothing." And so that sparked a few interesting conversations, but mostly from other agency owners and sort of freelancers. And they said, "Well, so you sold your agency, could you teach us how to do that?" And essentially they bribed me with coffee and cake and would pick my brains for half an hour or longer sometimes. And I just helped them. I just give them tips and advice on what I'd learned over those 12 years. And it turned out actually the mentoring side of things, one, I really enjoyed it. Got a great deal of sort of intrinsic value out of helping people. And secondly, I was actually quite good at it. So 2017 rolled round, my earnout started to run out and deplete a bit, so I had to essentially set up, go pro as it were with the coaching side of things. Founded Fearless Business, which is what I'm still doing today. So now we have a business accelerator for grassroots business owners, coaches, consultants, freelancers. Essentially, we're mainly helping them with productizing their services, sort of packaging up their offer so they're no longer beholden to charging hourly rates or day rates, which means we have a lot of conversations around pricing and money mindset and things like that. How to grow a business where you can, in an ideal world, earn double the money but with half the clients, and where you've got fewer clients, which you need to have fewer sales conversations. You can do less marketing, and you can be far more strategic. So that's the goal now: is to hopefully help small business owners make a little bit more money and create a bit of freedom for themselves.
That's great. Thanks for giving us the background. What would you say, kind of going back, it seems like a lot of your coaching philosophy is to decrease the number of clients, but increase the rates. So what would you say, would allow someone that's maybe middle of the pack as far as pricing and services go? How do they, what do they have to do in order to increase their prices and still be getting clients?
Well, first of all, it's just about reprogramming, like the reason why they're caught in that messy middle where essentially they love the work which they do, they're getting great results for their clients, but they're scratching their head at the end of the month sort of going, well, where have all the hours gone this month and why aren't I earning the money which I want? So there's that moment of self-awareness where you're kind of like, things aren't really working for me, which I suppose is what I went through with my agency. When it comes to pricing though, that there's some challenges there because you're fighting up against a lot of kind of tradition, like beliefs basically. So one of those fears might be, oh, if I raise my prices, people won't buy my services anymore. Or when I look at the prices of my competitors, if I'm charging more than my competitors, then they'll go to them. They won't come to me. So we've got to reprogram just some of those basic beliefs initially, so that people start to realize that it's less about what we think we could charge, but actually there's a business side to this. Uh, you know, when it comes around to business, there's lots of different metrics like levers which you can pull within a business. All of which they're not binary. They don't have to be on or off. They can be to varying degrees. So, just as an example, it could be that maybe you need a slightly higher conversion rate. Maybe you're not, you haven't had any formal sales training, so you struggle to sell, so your conversion rate is quite low. So one of the levers might be, can we get better at sales? So we increase our conversion rate a little bit. Another lever might be, well, we don't want to double or triple or quintuple our prices, but could we raise our prices by say 30%, knowing that that's going to make a bit of a difference? So there's another lever which we pull. Can we encourage clients to come and repeat purchase with us rather than just making a one-time sale? Can we get them to come back several times? There's another lever that we pull if we can increase customer win back by 25%, say. And I think it's knowing that business owners, you just kind of have to just push these levers a little bit, so you're just outside your comfort zone. And like just as a very simple example, so let's say a business is doing $100,000 a year, but maybe they're making like $10,000 profit, so a 10% net profit margin. Well, you can increase your prices by say 10%, so you make $110,000. But if you keep all of your overheads and expenses the same, that 10K falls straight to the bottom line, and straight away you've doubled your net profit. And actually, it's very cliched, but the phrase I always like to remind business owners is that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king. So again, there's another layer which we add into this. Like, you get a lot of people who are like, seven-figure business owners, but they haven't got two pence to, rub together because their business isn't particularly profitable. But so net profit for me is far better a metric to measure, because at the end of the day, you want to build a profitable and sustainable business. But then we come on to cash, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. So let's say, for example, imagine if you had a service that was, I don't know, $12,000, right? And a lot of people are like, right, we'll introduce an installment plan, payment plan, to make it easier for people to buy, so reduce the friction a little bit. So we'll give them 12 months to pay $1,000 a month, for example. Now, the thing is, you've sold a 12K product. So on paper, turnover looks good, profit looks good, but month one, you've only collected $1,000. So cash is actually one of the critical factors in growing any business. So what we encourage people to do in that example, for example, for argument's sake, would be to charge some kind of an artificially inflated upfront fee, a deposit or an enrollment fee or something like that, and then a slightly lower monthly fee. So you could probably charge, in this instance, maybe, I don't know, $6,000 up front. So we collect lots of cash, and it makes the business very cash flow positive. And then we give people, still 12 installments, but at $500 a month over 12 months, for example. And it's actually building, strong positive cash flow in a business, which is absolutely vital. Ensuring then that on books, on paper, that we have that positive, net profit between sort of 20 and 30% as a minimum. And then turnover, if that looks good, well, that's just a bonus.
Okay. So, I mean, I understand where the positives are, but let's say someone is a consultant, a business consultant maybe, and, they specialize in a specific type of business. But let's say there are many business consultants just like them. What can you say to that person if he says, okay, well, I see the benefits of raising my prices by 30%, but I'm afraid because why would someone go with me? Because right now I'm at a competitive price. Why
Yeah.
would someone choose my services that are 30% more now rather than, the guy over there that's 30% less?
Yeah. So I suppose the question I would push back with is like, why wouldn't they? Because if you are good at what you do and you're able to articulate your value, you're confident in your results because you've worked with X number of hundreds of clients prior to that. You've got lots of social proof, case studies, reviews, testimonials. Maybe you could even introduce a money back guarantee if it's not gimmicky, if you genuinely are that confident in your ability to deliver results. But the one question which it always kind of flips it for me. So if you were to push back with that and say, well, how do I know if people are going to buy or not? I'd say, well, how do you know they're not going to buy at a higher price point? What evidence do you actually have for that? Have you ever increased your prices by 30% and pitched at least 30 people at those prices? There's something called statistical significance, which a lot of people overlook. So a natural human instinct is we're drawn towards the negative. It's a survival instinct. So we'll go and pitch one person at 30% higher price point. They'll say that's too expensive, and then we'll believe them. And that's a straw poll of one person. So imagine if L'Oreal, when they're doing their hair care, shampoo adverts, and they put, we polled one woman and she loved our shampoo. You'd think, well, that's just one person's opinion on your product, right? How believable is that? Trustworthy is that? So normally when you see them, they're polls of like hundreds, if not thousands of women, and 69% of them thought that it was a really great product. Same thing with pricing. Effectively, you've got to go out and gather enough data before you can categorically say whether people would buy it or not. So I have a very simple rule, which is 30-30, which we go through with all of our clients now. So whenever they want to release a new product into the market, if they want to increase their prices, if they're making any sort of big changes within the business or small changes, you've got to go out and pitch at least 30 people with that new offer before you decide whether it's worked or not. The first 30. The second 30 is we're looking for a 30% conversion rate. So out of those 30, we want 10 people to say yes to the offer. Again, a lot of people are like, well, 20 people saying no, 30% is a conversion rate. Is that not really low? Well, the goal in business is not to enroll every single client. The goal in business is to build a profitable, sustainable business. So if that means fewer higher paying clients, that gets us to a point where we've got good turnover, good profit and good cash flow, it doesn't matter if a majority of people are saying no. It's like every business should have this inherent amount of failure built into it. But it's under our control. So 30 pitches, we want to get a 30% conversion rate, so at least 10 of them saying yes to our offer. If it's lower than that, well, maybe we have pushed the bar too hard when it comes to raising the prices. I've never had that with a client. Can I say never? Am I allowed to say that? No, that's not true. I've gone through this process with thousands of business owners, and I could count on one hand the number of times when we've pushed the limit on prices and we've had sub a 30% conversion rate. So it's a very high chance that you will convert somebody at a higher price point. You've just got to get out there and get confident at selling at that price point.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. So,
No trouble.
what would you say some of the most common blind spots that you see when people come to you for coaching?
The most common one is the it's kind of that shiny object syndrome where we see the success that other people are having and we think that's what we should be doing in our business, and then when things aren't going to plan, we don't then sort of query or question why we're doing the thing, and maybe even stop doing it. Like marketing is one of the most common places where I see these blind spots happening, where you see all of these, there's 1,001 different ways to, market your business these days and attract new clients. But for me, for example, there's three things that I could nail it down to, activities in marketing, say podcast interviews, speaking on the stage, and then my books, that over the last 10 years, I've gravitated away from doing those things, and I always gravitate back towards them because those three things are my marketing mix that works for me. And I've thrown enough mud at the wall now with like different shiny object syndromes that I've come across, to know gut instinct wise whether something's going to work or not quite quickly. So yeah, a lot of business owners are busy kind of following somebody else's dream, seeing how somebody else is growing their business, assuming that that's going to work for them. And quite often it doesn't. You've just got to, marketing is all about running 10,000 experiments until you find the marketing mix that works for you. The second blind spot, and this one really frustrates me, is where people say things like, oh, I don't understand numbers. And frankly, I believe that that's an excuse, because as a business owner, it's the same functions in business the world over. It doesn't matter what the nature of your product or service is, but marketing, sales, admin, finance, operations, systems, they're the same functions that happen in every single business. If you don't know your numbers, and I don't just mean the finances, it's not just about understanding your profit and loss, it's about understanding what your conversion rate is, what your average order value is, what your customer lifetime value is, what your net profit is. It's about understanding all of these different metrics at a very basic level, because they're integral to a business. And the amount of times I see people who are like, oh, I don't understand numbers, they offload their books, bookkeeping and accounts to an accountant who, by the time, let's say your year end is December the 1st, you hand over your books, you're already a year out of date because you transacted stuff in January the 1st this year. Your accountant takes several months to then do your books for you, and then they come back to you and say, you owe X amount of tax and you've got Y amount of profit, and but it's all very backward looking. And then a lot of business owners are like, well, oh crap, I didn't realize I was going to have to pay so much tax. I haven't got it saved. So now we're working in arrears to earn the tax that we owe for last year. And so it's a very backward looking thing. So I try and encourage people to at least understand the numbers enough so that you don't get these nasty surprises, so that you can just take a look at a basic set of profit and loss accounts in Xero or QuickBooks or wherever, and go, okay, our profit for this year is X, therefore I need to set 20% aside for tax, which is Y, and I can put that in a rainy day fund. And even if it's not 100% accurate, at least if you're close enough, that means that the shock is a lot less. And the little things like that, or, in sales, oh, I don't like making cold calls. Well, that's fine, but what are you going to do instead? So we can't have these little excuses in business. And then the final blind spot is an interesting one, and this is more so linked to, again, it's kind of linked to the pricing side of things. But imagine there's a business owner, they run a small dog grooming salon, and maybe it's an area which is a bit deprived. Okay, and all you hear is them talking about when you meet up with them. They're like, "Oh, it's so hard to get clients. Nobody in my area's got any money." I'd be like, "Well, why are you in business then? If it's this hard, if you genuinely believe it's this hard and nobody has money, why are your doors still open and you're still taking clients?" So we kind of create these beliefs, limiting beliefs for ourselves. My view is that if you're going to start a business, at least set the beliefs up for success. Like, I'm going to make X amount of money. I believe that these clients are out there. I've just got to find them. And it's the same result. You still make the money, but you do it in a more easy and effortless way because you're not in that struggle, like excuses, blame and denial sort of mindset.
And so how, talking about the limiting beliefs, so how do you help clients sort of break through their limiting beliefs? Do you dive into what those are, what the invisible ceilings are, and kind of address them, or how do you work with them?
Yeah, so this for me is like that where for me I have to draw the line around my coaching capabilities. So I'm not a traditional pure coach, and I'm not certainly not sort of a certified psychologist or anything like that. So I'm a business coach. So for me, I have to stick to the kind of the pure sort of business skills. I do have team members though, for example, I've got a hypnotherapist in my group. So he's a certified therapist, and he can help people on the mindset side of things. So, I guess that would be the first port of call, is go and speak to an expert who has more experience in that vein. From a purely business perspective, I'm looking for something called activation. So what I've noticed is that limiting beliefs tend to cause procrastination, overwhelm, but most importantly, inertia. It just stops people from actually taking action and doing something. So my goal as a business coach is to try and take that big like feeling of whatever's like causing that inertia and try and just break it down into its constituent parts, so that like what's the smallest, the tiniest, smallest, simplest first step you can take forward that you're going to learn something from and get some positive like reinforcement around. So it could be if somebody has that limiting belief around their local customers, not everybody in the area being deprived and nobody's got any money. Well, it's like, well, hang on a second, let's just have a look at how many people came into your dog grooming salon last month and actually had their dog groomed. And they're like, "Oh, we had 43 customers last month." Well, there you go. There's some evidence there that demonstrates that some people can afford it. Okay. And so it's just about finding what's that little thing just to kind of break the inertia and just create a small movement. And then it's like the ripple effect. From there, it's like a stone being thrown into a pebble. When they see that little bit of evidence just built on the self-belief, and then they can start to move forward.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there a pattern that you see that your clients are having problems with when they come to you? Is there a place where everyone kind of gets stuck and that prompts them to seek coaching?
Really great question. So I'm going to be a bit vague here, unfortunately, but like most people's challenges, they're always different. Everybody gets stuck at different points. I suppose what it is if I were to create sort of a generalization around the types of clients which I typically tend to work with, it's that they see a gap between where they want to be or where they see themselves and where they're currently at, and they can't see how to bridge that gap. And again, a lot of the time, clients which I work with, for me, like I've discovered that business can be fun, it can be incredibly fulfilling, it can deliver freedom, in a multitude of different ways, and also generate finance, which is like detached from the amount of time you put into your business. So I think a lot of people kind of see me living that life and they want to sort of emulate that. And perhaps they've just lost sight of the fact that business should be fun, and they're kind of in this funk. It feels hard work. It feels like, you're kind of falling into that grind hustle sort of culture and mentality. But yeah, as a broad sort of rule of thumb, it's because there's this gap between the work that they've done and the output which they expected.
When someone comes to you and they begin working with you, what's the process like? Can you talk about sort of it sounds like it's not just you, you have a whole team, and I'm sure you address, the exact reason why they're there. But what does it look like for a client from being onboarded to, their journey with Fearless?
Yeah, so the first thing that I think, actually, kind of, this is also an answer to the last question as well. So typically, most people are very much in the mindset of, I need more clients to grow my business. So we have to unpick that first, because remember, the dream business isn't one where we're enrolling all the clients. Actually, we want fewer clients making more money. So we have to get over this hump of like, I need marketing tactics and like practical stuff now to get clients now. We have to kind of get them out of that mindset and actually focus on the business first, because there's no point in them marketing if their offer's not straight, if they're not charging enough, if they don't have the capacity to deliver to enough clients, you name it. There's all sorts of other sort of symptoms which crop up at this stage. So you've kind of got to unprogram some of that first. A major part of that is just getting them out of habits, again, ways that they think they should be sort of growing their business. So a lot of the clients I work with are typically, they're selling, hourly rates or day rates to their clients, so time for money, which essentially means that they're selling what they do, but that what they're not doing is selling based on the outcomes or results of what they do to their clients. So, web designer who's building HTML standards compliant websites with a shopping cart and a blog, nobody cares about any of that stuff. What the business owner who buys their websites are most interested in is this going to get me, found on AI search and Google search and inquiries coming in and converted into clients. So what we do is we have to shift their value proposition from talking about what they do to actually the results and outcomes of the thing, whatever it is they do. So it's called productizing services, and typically there's sort of three constituent parts to it. So the first one is identifying that dream outcome or result and helping them to articulate it. The second thing is then figuring out, can it be delivered over a clearly defined period of time? And this is where there's a swear word which often crops up at this point from our clients. And the swear word is two words: it depends. And we banned it at Fearless HQ because it depends is essentially like a code for, we do too many things for too many different types of people. We've got no robust systems or processes to run it because everything's very confusing. The clients get unpredictable results. We're quite resentful of our clients. That's what it depends is code for. So our goal is, when we're going through that productized service, figuring out the dream outcome, doing that one thing really well for one specific type of client, you can then start to build systems and processes that are teachable, learnable, and repeatable. And then therefore, if it's predictable, it should take a similar amount of time for those similar clients. So we want to drill it down into a fixed period of time. And then the final thing is then, because we do one thing really well for one specific type of client within a fixed period of time, can we then deliver it for a fixed fee? So we charge a fixed amount for it. So I'll give you an example. Imagine the web designer again. I'll give you examples of three web designers. I'll try and keep it brief. So web designer number one comes along, and Igor's in the market for a website. And so this first web designer says it'll be $50 an hour, and I'll charge you, it'll be about 20 hours to build your website. And you think, well, $1,000 sounds about fair. Okay, go ahead. So he disappears off for like 3 months because it takes him that long, because he's not very experienced at doing what he's doing. So he doesn't do it very quickly. He's taken on too many clients because he's too cheap. And he eventually comes back with his website. You look at it and go, oh, hang on, where's the shopping cart and the blog, that I wanted? And he says, well, it's going to take you an extra 10 hours to build it, so I need to charge you for that. And now you're resentful because you're going to get charged for something you didn't think you should be charged for. And he's a good person, so he doesn't charge you for it. But now he resents you because he's not getting paid what he thinks he should be getting paid, right? So web designer number two comes along, and they're a web ninja. They've been doing it for years, but they don't know what Robin and Igor know about pricing. So they're still charging $50 an hour, but because they've been doing it for ages, they come back after a week with a better website with all the features that you wanted. It looks better and it can get found in Google, but it only took them 10 hours of billable time. So we can see that hourly rates doesn't work. It doesn't favor the master craftsman. It doesn't favor the one who's put time and energy into learning and mastering their craft. So the guy who is more expert, does a better job, does it faster, ends up getting paid less than the first guy who was inexperienced. And then we get website designer number three who comes along. And she's been doing it for years. She knows all about marketing. She's like, Igor, you don't even need the blog or the shopping cart. You just need a video sales letter with a sales page on it and a button for people to book a call with you. And I reckon if I can build that for you, I can do it in 72 hours. And we can get you about 20 qualified leads a month for your business, guaranteed. If I can't do that, I'll refund you everything and I'll return you $1,000 extra just for wasting your time. And then you go, oh, well, how much is that? That sounds really cool. That's exactly what I need, loads of leads. And she says it's $10,000. And you go, okay, well, let's think about this for a second. Those 20 leads, how much is each one of those worth? Okay, it's 10K, but I reckon in a couple of months I'll have made that money back. Plus, if it doesn't work out, will I get a refund anyway? Yep, let's go for that. So you can see that the way that we articulate the value around our offer, you can demonstrate like 10 times the value and charge based on that if you're really clear on, you know, who it is you serve, how long it's going to take, and for that fixed fee. So once we've kind of figured out their offer and where they want to get to, there's obviously like a graduation which happens through that process. So that whole process is typically, it's about sort of 6 months before we get to a point where somebody is charging what they had hoped to charge. But again, we have some clients who just dive straight in and like, yeah, Rob, I'll double my prices, no problem. But then there's a lot of other people who have some resistance and they need to kind of work through it at a gradual sort of pace. So we do this really cool thing, which I call a pricing auction, where, you know, let's say, for example, they're maybe charging the equivalent of, I don't know, $1,000 now, and they want to get to a point where they're charging 10K for something. We've worked out intellectually, like, well, they've agreed that they're too cheap, and they've worked out intellectually where they need to get to, but like to go from 1K to 10K is just too big a leap. So what I do is I just subtly introduce some numbers. So I'd just be there saying, well, how about if we charge $1,500 for it, or $1,800, or I don't know, maybe $2,500 or $3K for it. Next, you know, you see their eyes widen, pop out their head, and they're like, so what we know there is that intellectually they know they're too cheap, 10K is too expensive, and they know roughly where they want to be. But pricing is interesting because we have this like mismatch between our head and our heart. So where I go through the auction and I see their body language like shift a point, you know, and in the example I said, K was where they switch from sort of inside to just outside their comfort zone. Well, it might be we go, okay, well, let's start at 3K for this offer. And what I'm looking for then is just that something called 30-30. So we'll go out and we'll make 30 pitches, aim for that 30% conversion rate at the 3K price point. And quite often, and we have different milestones as well within that. So milestone number 1 is simply just going and pitching at a higher price point, not closing anything, not getting a new client at it. Great if they do, but just simply hearing themselves say the bigger number first and foremost. Because if they're not sold on it themselves, how are they're gonna struggle to sell it to somebody else? Milestone number 2 is obviously then getting their first yes at that new price point. And then milestone number 3 is where we then look for consistency. Are we then starting to punch towards that 1 in 3 conversion rate, you know, with certain degree of consistency, so we're getting clients regularly at the higher price point. And quite often what I find is that before we've even gone through the full cycle of 30 pitches and 30% conversion rate, clients have already pushed their own prices up because they're already starting to believe in themselves and see that they're actually doing really great work for their clients and delivering results for their clients. So therefore they feel already. And it's like riding a bike. Once you've learned how to put your prices up once, you can't unlearn that. You can use the same process time and time again, even without our help.
So, you know, it seems like when someone knows they're too cheap, they kind of lack the confidence to just jump to 1K, even though they know
Yeah.
that they're at 1K and that's too cheap. So what you're saying is that you work with someone to raise their confidence, but in the product that they're selling and their offer, I'm sure you work on that as well. So that all comes together where by the end of the program, your client feels like they have the confidence to back up the price that they're asking.
Yeah. And it's a really robust framework because business owners pivot. It's just a natural, you know, periodically, it's a natural part of the process. You know, not all of them, obviously, but a small number of them will pivot. And what we've discovered is that once they learn these basics, foundational elements of like how to package up an offer, how to set a fixed price for it, then how to incrementally increase the prices, we've noticed that our clients are able just to go, if they choose that they want to do something else, just take what they've learned and apply it straight away to another offer and run with it almost immediately. So it's very much like, you know, paint by numbers. Once you know it, you can just continue to do that over and over again. You know, and there's also lots of nuances to that around sort of how we articulate our value on things like sales calls, for example. So a lot of people have a lot of fear around sales calls. And again, that's just about muscle memory and reps. Once you know how to hold a sales call confidently in a non-pushy, non-aggressive, non-persuasive way that it feels much more like it's just a natural conversation with somebody. Again, that's just another layer. That's like level 2 on sort of productizing your service and value articulation. So all of these stages is all about just gradually just building your confidence, build your confidence, build your confidence. There's no, I said earlier on, there's no one thing which all of a sudden you do it and it just transforms the business. It's about a number of different things coming together at the same time.
Okay, well, thank you for elaborating on that. So if someone listening right now would like to contact you and Fearless, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, two ways. So jump onto LinkedIn, connect with me, and drop me a message, and hopefully Igor will share a link somewhere around the interview for you to do that. But I've also got a gift as well for your listeners, Igor. I've got some signed copies of my book, Take Your Shot, which need homes. So if you want to jump onto fearless.biz/TYS, postage is optional. I'll post it anyway if you pop your address in there, wherever you are in the world. And it's just a story about one of my early coaching clients, a golf pro called Russ, who we helped to do some of the things which we've discussed today on the podcast.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I really appreciate that. So thank you for being a guest, Robin.
My pleasure. Thank you.